Hey guys, your girl Alicia K Geek XX Chic. We're back with another review to The Walking Dead. This is for episode 5, which was called Out of the Ashes. So this episode, we finally got a peek into the Commonwealth and just an idea of what it's like in there and kind of what options are available to our group after that very long wait. And we also got to check in on our two groups, Maggie, Negan, and also Alexandria, as they're continuing to navigate their very, very tough time. And I think I'm going to start with them actually and then come to the Commonwealth last. As far as, we'll go with Maggie and Negan. We didn't get too much on them, but clearly, I don't know, I feel like the show is kind of trying to push a bit of a redemption arc for Negan here. Having him be with somebody who really he wronged the most, I guess one could say, out of all the people that are left in Alexandria. The very strong and emotional bond that Maggie and Glenn had, and the fact that Glenn was such a beautiful, kind person who he couldn't have been a less deserving person of that particular punishment. We all know that Maggie has all the reasons in the world to never, ever, ever, ever trust or forgive Negan for what was done. So if there's anyone who's going to give Negan a green light to walk into the second part of his life, I guess you could say, the life past Negan the Savior, Maggie is the perfect candidate. Like, she's the one who would kind of have to give it the rubber seal of approval, right? If Maggie can forgive Negan, then anyone can. So I know that a lot of people have mixed feelings about this. I am not against a redemption arc, only in the sense of, if this was a real situation where the world has fallen apart and people are the last resource that everybody needs, you don't want to be so quick to close the door on what people have done. I talked about this a lot, like back, at least probably 2-3 seasons ago now, that the reality is we're looking at this from our group's perspective and we have our own reasons for why we hate Negan or really dislike Negan or just feel like he should always be on the outside. But if you were to take this show and flip it around and look at it from Negan's perspective, and this was a story told from his eyes, many of us would probably be on the side of Team Negan, and we would have thought that Rick and his group were the people who were crazy. Everyone at this point in the apocalypse, almost everyone I should say, has done things that their old selves would have shuddered at, or they would have never actually thought they were capable of. A lot of people have had to do some horrific things to survive in this world, and some people we can empathize with more. Some people will say they were right. Other people will say what they did was unforgivable. But the reality of this post-apocalyptic world is that morals have become extraordinarily gray, and it's not as easy to say that that's unforgivable than that, and you were wrong and I was right. And as I said, as people continue to survive and figure out how to navigate this new world, there's always going to be this wavering between how far is too far and who did something that was truly beyond the point of return. And so with that in mind, the idea that Negan can never actually turn it around and be a better person and be useful, and that he doesn't get the right to be able to live a new life is very debatable. I personally feel like it's not that he doesn't deserve a second chance, but it's more like, why do you have to do it in Alexandria? Like, I kind of wish he would go elsewhere. Like, if he went to another community and no one knew the name Negan and he could just start over, that's one thing. Like, no one should necessarily stop him from doing that. But yeah, I understand why some people would feel like, why Alexandria? Why do you have to come here for the very people who were the victims of your terrorism and make your new life here and make us try to accept you now? So it's not as easy as it sounds, but as I said, I do think that the show is kind of pushing this relationship because they do want a Negan redemption arc. And like I said, if Maggie finds a way to forgive him, then that pretty much is like, well, if Maggie forgives him, who could possibly not, right? Who can really say that Negan hasn't changed at that point? So not much to say, as I said. They kind of just kept having their little banter back and forth. That moment where, they were fighting over whether or not Negan should leave was very weird. It kind of had some weird energy there. I'm hoping it's just a matter of the two of them just trying to find some weird crossroads. What I will not ever, 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 ever be about, and I don't think the show will ever go here, but I will never be about Negan and Maggie as anything other than slightly less hostile friends. Okay, that is it. I will never, if they even think of putting a romantic twist on those two, I will lose my, I'm not even, I shouldn't even put it in the universe, but you know what I'm saying. I have seen shows where they do that, where suddenly the person who's been super wronged by someone and they somehow suddenly fall in love. No, we're not having that. On to Alexandria. Aaron, he's going through it right now. understandable. There's been a lot of trauma, and as they say, you know, we kind of have had this with different characters throughout the seasons, that once the imminent danger is over and people have some time to kind of rest a little bit and get out of that immediate fight or flight kind of thinking, that's typically when the trauma and the emotions start to flood in. And we're seeing that happen with Aaron now. We saw that with that dream. It's like a culmination of all the threats that they've been dealing with over the last little while. It has kind of been back to back, threat after threat after threat, kind of hitting them. And yeah, he just kind of had a moment in that dream where it's kind of all culminating. And now I think the big thing is he's on his own. You know, he's lost his best friend, his partner, and now he's got a daughter to worry about. So there's so much more for him to kind of stress over, and it's getting to him. And we saw that in the last couple of episodes. He's very stressed out about the situation. He really doesn't want to see anything happen to Gracie. And he just, at this point, I think he's starting to feel like, I have no idea we're going to fix this. Can we fix this? That dream that he had and how it ended up influencing his whole interaction with those whispers that had taken up residence in Hilltop. And when you think about the symbolism of that many a whisperer was responsible for turning Hilltop into what it is now, that sad, still burning graveyard. To think that they would take up refuge there and decide to make it their new home, it does seem a little bit, it seems wrong, it seems horrible. And you see that moment like where Jerry finds Nabila's scarf and he's like, no, you're one of the people who violated our home, like you took so much from us. You understand where all that raw emotion came from both of them. And, you know, seeing that really helped to reinforce the timeline. Because, you know, in Walking Dead, the timeline is always all over the place. So it's very confusing sometimes. But it's still very fresh for them. And as was brought out there, when Aaron lost it and started to torture this guy, his fears and all of the strips taken out of his belief in humanity by, you know, the wolves and then the whisperers and saviors, like it's just been like hit after hit after hit of him seeing just how terrible the world has become in so many ways. And he didn't have that before. Like, remember, he was behind the Alexandria walls very early, much like Yumiko's brother, which we'll get to in a minute. So it really was a huge wake-up call for him from the saviors right up until now to see just how low and depraved and debased people really are. Really kind of wonder if there's a bottom to that pit, you know? And here's this man who was a whisperer, yes, and is still doing a lot of the things that he learned under Alpha's tutelage. And Aaron just immediately assumed the worst about him, that there's no way that maybe he's just trying to find a way to survive in a world where the last secure thing he had was destroyed in a matter of minutes and everybody was scattered. You understand where he's coming from. You understand where the distrust comes from. And it's hard in that scene because both people are validated in the sense of the whisperer wanting to protect his own, but also Aaron and everybody else feeling like you don't get the choice in doing that. Aaron's fears overall, like all of his trauma and fears, really overshadowed the fact that this guy, I mean, looking at him like, yeah, he took a swipe at Aaron, but he did it because he was trying to protect his people, right? He didn't want them to end up dead. And I mean, yes, he did say his creepy Alpha speech about how the dead are honest and it's people who lie. The reality is that, like I said, like people are just trying to survive. And just because they've chosen to continue to wear skin masks and use the dead as protection doesn't mean that they want to go around destroying communities and doing the horrible things that Alpha did. It kind of comes back to Aaron not really getting to decide, or anyone else, that that's the wrong way for them to survive in this crazy world now, right? Everyone's going to do what they need to do. So it was very interesting to see that moral discussion come out of the way that he was torturing that guy and how eventually Carol had to stop him. I think that Carol stepping in at that moment and being like, look, this guy, look at him. Like it's what, 4-on-1. He's gonna die. Like, we don't need to do this. We don't need to torture him to death. How are we any different than Alpha or any of the people that we fought against if this is what we're doing to somebody? The fact that Carol, and I love that, you know, we got that insight into Carol when she said, like, I know how you feel. I actually do, because that's how I felt after Henry, but you saw where that took me and you saw how much I lost as a result of that. Like, yes, I ended up killing Alpha, but the whole community still doesn't trust me. I lost a lot of friendships. I lost a piece of myself and what I was willing to do to get that revenge. So, like, yeah, she's just trying to warn Aaron that it's a very dark and usually fruitless path that he's following right now. And honestly, it's not going to change anything. They're still going to live in a world that's super unsafe. And if it's not the Whisperers, it's going to be someone else. So he's going to have to find a way to deal and still keep whatever version of his humanity that he feels he has to in order to continue surviving in this world. Yeah, that was an interesting little story arc, but it's just kind of letting us know that everyone's getting to a snapping point in Alexandria here. If something does not come through soon, we're going to see some pretty dark, even darker times, let's put it that way, in Alexandria, when people start to turn on each other for food and for resources, and just out of fear of the fact that their walls are not holding. Which actually, speaking of the walls, gotta give a shout out to my badass girl, Judith, in the house. Them boys, the fact that she sat there and took on a boy who was probably a solid 4 or 5 years older than her, and she said, you better call me a baby again. Say it with your chest to my face. See if I don't take your whole Adam's apple out right now. She was not the one. I don't know who. Apparently he must have been new to the community. He must have been. Because anybody else in that community knows you do not mess with Judith Grimes, okay? You know you do not mess with that little girl. She tiny, but she dangerous, okay? Please. You don't know her mama. If you knew who her mama was, you wouldn't have dared. But still, these stupid boys playing with walkers at the gate like they can't get bit. And you know, if one of them got bit, they probably hide that stuff until they turned and end up being walker bombs inside the community. Judith said, I can't believe I'm the baby and I gotta tell y'all how to act around walkers. You better stop. That was just a badass moment I wanted to call out. Just saying. And we got a Carl mention for the first time in years, so that was pretty nice as well. I'm hoping that conversation is hopefully a hint that we are going to get that preview of Rick in this season, or coming back sometime in this season. I'm hoping, or at least we got to see him. I know that there's still supposed to be a movie in some millennium, but I really would love to see Rick have the chance to see his kids again, especially RJ, because he's never met him. So anyway, finally we had the Commonwealth. Finally. We got to see what was behind these walls and what was worth all that interrogation. And yeah, they're living in this beautiful, blissful, ignorant utopia that they built some time ago. It very much reminds me of kind of how Alexandria was back in season 5, except clearly at a much larger scale. Alexandria could have potentially become like a Commonwealth if there had been more people on board, but they have their crap together here. Like, they've got security, they've got a form of government, they've got currency, all the things that Yumiko said in the last episode where she ran down Scully and Mulder. For the group to kind of come in there and see this place, where, especially after what they went through, everything with Alpha and the Whisperers, to come to this, being on the road, to get there, being within walls again, quiet, kids running in the streets, music playing, the fact that they've got all of these luxuries, ice cream, television, they're making videos still, like they've got visual mediums, they've got electricity, they've got all this, delicious varieties of food, like people are just laughing and chuckling in the streets. Like, this is like society. It's like the world that they once knew. And it's been so long for them, especially, I would say, well, not that long, because I guess Alexandria was somewhat like that before the Whisperers went nuts with it. But you get my point. It's been a minute. And even at Alexandria's best, it was not as luxurious as this. And Alexandria was just like one community, whereas this, as they said, as Yumiko's brother said, it spans several city blocks. Like, it's actually like a city. So that's a really big change for our team to see. And you can see that there was a little bit of the wow factor and we missed this factor. And I love that line that Eugene said where he was like, I didn't realize how many mundane things that I missed until I got here. Like being able to get some ice cream, or exchanging money, or watching a video, or any of those things, right? These are all little things that, even today, most of us take for granted, but if it suddenly all went away, we'd probably be surprised at how much of it we'd miss. I like that, as soon as they got in, they're like, look, we got to see if we can help our people. Thankfully, Alexandria is still very much front of mind, but that's understandable. Like, they just got in. Of course, they're going to still be on the mission. What I can see, though, is that if they do end up staying, that lull, that warm, sweet embrace of temptation slowly taking them over, as they might start falling in love with the idea of this life and not wanting to go back to what they had, which is now at this point gonna feel so much worse. We saw Eugene take the chance at radioing back home to let everyone know that they made it and that they're okay. I understand him wanting to do that because he did leave before the Alpha situation was fully resolved. So it made sense for him to take that risk. I kind of wish he hadn't done it day one. That was a bit much, but yeah, our group's already in trouble. Unfortunately, they already went and got themselves, not all of them. Yumiko was out of it, which is probably by design, but they're already in trouble with the Commonwealth and potentially potentially facing being, well, as what's her name said, Eugene, or I can't even think of Eugene's girlfriend's name right now, Stephanie. As Stephanie said, like, they probably won't get kicked out thanks to whoever face of the video guy is, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to be in trouble. And to start off in your new home under probation already, guys, I think they were already on probation. Like they said, they were asylum seekers. They're not even citizens. It's probably going to be a less than ideal situation. Let's put it that way. Because we noticed that once they started getting into the community, people don't really talk to them. We saw the dude who gave them their assignments. He didn't want to talk to them. He's like, if you got any problems, go talk to your supervisor. Leave me alone. Like, things aren't quite as peachy keen as they're making it look on the street. I think that their punishment situation might end up showing us the real, well, I should say the less than shiny side of what the Commonwealth is all about. Because we all know there's got to be something wrong with this community, right? Then we had Yumiko, of course. She found her brother, long last. Interesting. It doesn't seem like the two of them are overly close. Like, I expected like hugs and tears and more of an emotional reaction, but it was very much like shock. And then, all right, so what have you been doing for the last like 10 years? Like, it's just a very interesting dynamic, but understandable. Like, I mean, it sounds like they weren't super close before the apocalypse. The interesting thing was more that you could see that Yumiko clearly has some feelings about the fact that he's been having a much easier time of it than she did. The way that she kept saying, oh, so you just found this place and you just stayed here the whole time behind these walls, baking cakes. And even though she made it seem like a question, there was a lot of judgment in her tone, and you could tell she very much felt like her brother should have done something else. But he said to her, like, look, don't try to tell me how to live. Like, I came here as one thing, but I discovered things that make me happy since I've been here, and that's where I'm at right now, and I don't want to change it. Yumiko seems like she's not 100% on board with it, but I do think that the more time they spend together, we're going to have the inevitable conversation where she's going to be like, well, while you were here figuring out which fondant to put on the next cake that you made, I was literally fighting for my life and watching my friends get, eaten. So it's nice that you've had enough peace and quiet that you sometimes forget that we're living in an apocalypse, but not all of us have had that luxury. Maybe you guys should be trying to help more people rather than hoarding what you've got. And, we'll just have that ever revolving debate about whether or not it was better or worse for someone to be behind the walls when this all happened. I'm very interested to see why they decided to bring Yumiko's brother into this. I'm not sure how he's going to factor in, but I have a feeling that whoever the Miltons are, that maybe this guy, her brother, or Yumiko and her brother might be looking to maybe change out who's in charge. I'm very interested to see how things are going to go in the Commonwealth. I want to know more about it. I want to meet this Milton lady. I want to see if it's the same girl that we saw several seasons ago. And yeah, I just want to know more about the Commonwealth and if this is all going to connect to, of course, Rick and Michonne in some way, because that's what everything comes down to for me in the end anyway. So yeah, it was a very interesting episode. I am looking forward to what comes next. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. If you did, please go ahead and give it a like, and we will see you in the next video.